may be new to Cure, who are visiting our facility for the first time, or don't know what it's all about, a few words. We are an innovation campus in New York City on Park Avenue South. They call it the Silicon Alley. It's right here in the Flatiron District on Park Avenue. And what we are all about is really bringing together people, capabilities at the intersection of different disciplines. We're a world-class facility with laboratory facilities, research, dry labs, engineering, event space, et cetera. But what we want to do is to bring things at the intersection, people capabilities at the intersection of disciplines and sectors. Speaking of which, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the intersection of AI, data, digital in healthcare and how that powers R&D, and especially at GSK, which is the focus of our topic today. And joining me today, we have the pleasure, actually, of having Mike Montello. And Mike is, I want to get this right, he's the SVP of R&D, Digital and Tech at GlaxoSmithKline, which is GSK, as you all know. And Mike works at the convergence of science, digital, and technology, and he's done so for more than 22 years, right? And he currently leads a digital and tech organization that's aligned to GSK's R&D enterprise with a portfolio engineered to reduce cycle times, thank goodness, and help increase the success rates for vaccines and medicines. And prior to GSK, he joined GSK in 2018, and prior to that, Mike oversaw tech platforms and clinical trials at IQVIA and held various leadership positions in IT at Shire Pharmaceuticals, and also spent 12 years at Accenture and holds an executive MBA from London Business School. Welcome, Mike.
It's great to be here. So
yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining. It's wonderful. And for those of you joining us online and on LinkedIn Live, hello as well. So, okay, so AI and data science and digital, everybody's talking about it. And especially in healthcare, it's sort of a new thing. It's a new trend or a new trajectory. But this is not new, actually, in many other disciplines, including in aerospace, astrophysics, right? Because to really unearth the secrets of the universe, astrophysicists and people like NASA have been using AI and digital and data to really explore the universe. So tell us a little bit about that and how that actually inspired you into this field.
Thank you, and thanks for starting with that question. And what I'll do is to bring this all to life, because it's hard to break down and understand how exactly is AI and data being used to discover new medicines. So I prepared 3 slides. There's no words, so it'll be very easy to understand, but I want to share a little bit of my story because it's what inspires me. It's why I spent the past 22 years helping to use technology to help accelerate research and development and bring medicines and vaccines to patients faster with quality. So my entire career has been built on this. So I've seen all different types of waves of technology be introduced. And 20 years ago, when you ran clinical trials, most of it was done using paper. And that's when I started my career in the industry. Wow. And I've seen that convert to electronic formats. And now here we are in this new age where we're generating very detailed images at the single cell level and using tools like AI to understand the root cause of disease. It's a really amazing time that we're living in. This image, for those of you that follow space, was taken by the James Webb Telescope. And I share this image because it is what inspires me, this advancement in technology. The James Webb Telescope took over a decade to build and has many advanced features like infrared sensors that can sense light from essentially the origin of the universe. So it allows us to see deeply into space. And I use this image because what we're doing in science for drug discovery is we're actually looking at our inner space and seeing deeply into the cell, inside our bodies. Yeah. So this inspires me, and when I see new technology being introduced, I get very excited. That's the geek in me. So I'm also an engineer, right? So I get very excited about technology. But these advances that are helping us see with these instrumentation, we have the similar advances that are helping us see within the cell. Um, and to actually bring that to life, this is an image from a GSK collaborator, Alpenglow. This is taken by a 3D microscope, and it's a digital image of a kidney. And you can imagine the amount of data that sits behind these images. And when we think about how AI is used in the real world, like how we're using it on our phones, like AI is helping with image detection. These are real examples, and these similar types of algorithms we can deploy on other types of data sets, like images that we're generating in laboratories. So I hope this brings things to life. And what my team does, so I lead R&D, digital and tech. And under that, we have investments in data engineers, and we have investments in software engineering, and many talented people that are working in the organization that are helping to integrate the data so the AI machine learning engineers can actually interrogate it and can begin to make sense with the data, can begin to see connections that we couldn't see using other tools before AI. This is an example of a knowledge graph. It's a representation of 300 billion biomedical data points, each one connected with each other. So it's not the number of data, it's the connection and the semantic meaning between the points. It takes a significant amount of engineering and talent in order to organize and bring this data to life. And then that's what our teams do. And there's other teams that are working on the models and the AI to actually understand biology and the root cause of disease. So that's my only slides, but I hope that's helpful. What inspires me, as well as what our teams are doing with data and AI.
I mean, that's actually quite. Can you guys hear me? Is this working? Okay, good. That's actually quite, brilliant, because on the one hand, we just to think about the fact that we were doing clinical trials using paper and pencil. I mean, the amount of data that you need to actually reach, statistical significance is quite high. And then if you think about, the Human Genome Project as an example, right? Because we talk about the space and we talk about the universe, but 30 years ago, the Human Genome Project was launched, and that was another example of data at work. Because at the end of the day, the human genetic code is also genetic information, and nowadays you don't go into the lab and you don't run gels to go, search the genome for genes. You're actually going to your laptop, is it not?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The going onto your laptop to perform science.
Yes.
And what you've seen over the past 20 years is many more careers being built using laptop to do computational biology, computational chemistry, and the data behind that organized in a way that actually can predict how molecules will perform in human before you start the clinical trials. So there's a lot of work done on laptops, and sitting behind the laptop sits platforms and supercomputing and all the engineers that helps to support the computational teams. So it's really grown exponentially. The data's grown exponentially, as well as the talent and the people that are actually prosecuting and interrogating that data to help understand it better. So yes, there's a lot being done on laptops, and then since the first genome was sequenced to today, just exponential growth. And we're generating more data in a single quarter than the past 300 years, and then each quarter it keeps growing. So it takes a lot of engineering to
So
to
how
harness
old
that
is
data.
GSK as a company?
I'm sorry?
How old is GSK as a company?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So it's over 300 years old, but I don't know the
Okay.
exact number of years. Yeah, I
So
can get
over
to you the answer to that.
300 years old, but I just heard you say that in the last quarter, you actually, gathered more data in the last quarter
Yeah,
than you've done in the last however many years, right?
that's right.
I mean, that is just crazy. But you need a lot of data for AI to work, isn't it not?
It's true.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that. Why do you need so much data, and why does AI work with more data?
Yeah, well, it's very dependent on the algorithm.
Mhm.
So the you need to have a large enough corpus in order to remove things like bias and also ensure that you have as many dimensions as possible to get the insights that you need. So there's some models that you don't need a ton of data, and there's some models that you need a little bit data. So that's where the data engineering is a skill that we're building. So we made an announcement earlier in the year that we're investing in something called Onyx, our research data platform. And Onyx will onboard over 100 data engineers. So they work very closely with the AI machine learning engineers to design the data sets required for those models. So the data sets required are products themselves. And so you need to size it correctly for the insight or question you're trying to answer. So large data is important, but you have to size the data for the actual question and that you're trying to answer. And one example, I shared that the knowledge graph, that started, that's now at 300 billion, I mentioned. It was 500 billion, so it went down in size.
Wow.
So it's more about the meaning and the semantic meaning of the relationships of the data, not necessarily the size of the total data sets.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about, GSK's discovery efforts and how, the large data sets and actually mining that data is helping you improve cycle times and also the probability of success.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So we're very focused on using genetics, genomics, and AI. Right, they're the three tools. And if targets, so targets, for those of you that are not in drug discovery, targets are essentially the starting point of finding new medicines and vaccines to treat specific something that's happening in biology. So we're validating targets using human genetics. So that's the linkage. And validated targets are twice as likely to succeed in clinical development. So we're using human genetics, genomics, and AI in drug discovery to help improve the probability of success when those medicines actually enter the clinic. So that's the efforts.
One thing that occurs to me is that the semiconductor industry, right? They gather large data sets because they share data. So data sharing was pretty much an early thing that happened in the semiconductor industry, and that allowed them to have large, data sets to query. How's data sharing happening in the biology field and the field of discovery and drug discovery?
Yeah, another great question. So we can't generate all the data ourselves. So a lot of the data is through partnerships. So with Tempest is a partnership where GSK gets access to data related to oncology, and then that data can be integrated and leveraged. So the data is generated internally. The data is also generated externally through different collaborations. So it's a combination of sharing within the industry and industry ecosystem that enables these larger data sets. And I was just reflecting on how you were describing Cure in this facility.
Yes.
Having so many different types of dimensions in the ecosystem, because under a single roof, a large roof in this beautiful facility, sits talent, sits data, sits laboratories. So sitting in this ecosystem actually could incubate a data set and ideas that could help with R&D. So. But yes, it's internal, external data sharing that enables drug discovery.
But you can have large sets of data, but you need to query it and you need people and technology to actually filter all that data and make sense out of it, right? So what's more critical? Is it the technology that you need, AI, or do you need people actually?
Well, people is most important.
People is most important.
So the strategy, uniting science, technology, and talent, you do need all three. So you need deep scientific domain. You need technology like we just talked about, like the graph technology or AI technology, and also people. So both scientists, the computational biologists, computational chemists, as well as all the engineering talent that sit within my organization. It literally takes a ton of disciplines and people coming together in order to solve these problems. So it's people is, without the people, of course, you can't solve the problem. But people, I think, is most important, and the talented people that really brings everything together.
And yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think, but also you have new technologies that are coming to the fore. CRISPR is an example, right? Gene editing and technologies like that. What kind of promise do they hold in terms of, using large data sets and querying them, but also being able to manipulate the data and manipulate it in order to improve human health, actually?
Yeah, CRISPR is a great example of science tech. So a lot of what I talked about is information technology around being able to engineer these large data sets on a science tech. So CRISPR is enabling scientists to understand the function of genes. And 3 years ago, GSK started up a laboratory for genomics research with UC Berkeley, UC San Francisco, with Jennifer Doudna. And we have a collaboration that is essentially using CRISPR technology to understand gene function. And that is one dimension of the data sets that kind of gets integrated with other data that enables us to understand biology. So it's a great example of science tech and the information technology coming together in order to actually get insight to predict if the medicines and vaccines will work. And so it's being used in the drug discovery processes.
That's great. And another technology that we've been hearing a lot about is this so-called digital twin, right? So there is a whole twin, but then there's twins of like organs, like kidneys and things like that. What's GSK doing in that arena? What is a digital twin, actually, to start with?
Yeah, digital twin. So there's a whole language that needs to be deciphered, and yeah, so digital
It's
twin.
it's not a hologram of me or you or anything like that, right? No.
No,
No, it's
no,
much more than that.
no. It's much more. I'll give 2 examples because I showed the 3D representation of a kidney. So the digital that was taken by the 3D microscope.
Yeah.
And so that's a digital twin of a kidney, of a physical kidney, right, represented in a digital form. So that would be a digital twin. But also, digital twins are very important in manufacturing. So if you follow the trend of this type of, I would call it type of use case, like you're using technology to build a digital solution to help give you insight. Digital twins can be made if you think about a manufacturing line, and for our purposes, so the actual process of making a molecule, you can digitize that process. So it sits side by side, it runs side by side to the physical process. And scientists can tune in stream, can tune the actual physical process to increase the yield of a molecule like that was made in a batch. So we use that term and that type of technology in the manufacturing processes, but it's also can be used in drug discovery as well.
So, for example, in vaccines, especially during the pandemic when we wanted to produce more, you could increase the yield using a digital twin? No.
Yes,
Yes, you
yeah,
could. Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
not just for vaccines,
Yep.
but
For
for many products.
many
Yep,
products.
for
And
the process engineering
that's pretty
piece.
exciting. That's pretty exciting. So, talking about digital twin and leading, to faster production of vaccines, how can AI help in pandemics, beyond just producing more vaccines? So, could you have I love Waze, for example. It'll tell me, watch out, car ahead, disabled car ahead. Can you not have something like that for pandemics, like watch out, coronavirus ahead? So then put on your mask.
So I'm also a Waze user. So, yeah, and that's the ambition,
Yeah.
right? To be more predictive.
Yep.
And for infectious disease and for vaccines, if you can predict what the most prevalent flu strain would be, then in the laboratory, the scientists can be working on the vaccine for that particular strain. So you can see how information that's generated in the real world can be used in research and development. So, again, it takes a lot of companies and academia and governments working together in order to create those predictive data sets in healthcare. And there's definitely opportunities for us to continue to work together on that. But yeah, the ambition is to predict, be more predictive, whether it's understanding infectious disease so we can research, or understanding what target will perform best for RX type medicines.
Speaking of predictive, what about ChatGPT? It's all the rage now, right? You trust ChatGPT to be the predictive thing? I mean, I know you and I like Waze, but what about ChatGPT? Well, I actually asked it, can you tell me a little bit more about Cure? And it couldn't. So
Okay.
it said, I do not have data. Cure must have been established before 2020 or 2021. I was like, okay. So whatever you put in, that's all ChatGPT has to give you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and there is so much happening right now, and discussions happening with ChatGPT, and the broader pattern for use of AI is generative AI. For those that you follow it, can I ask the audience a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. How many people have used it? Okay, and then for those that are watching online, that's pretty much the entire room. So, and I also have tried to use it to look up, the best recipe to make, if I was making something. It's just
Did you
it's a
actually
nice
try
tool.
the recipe and did it turn out good?
No, I have to admit, I'm not the best cook.
So it's not ChatGPT's fault.
I've been trying. We all use different search engines to perform search, and I've been actually using the technology to learn, how I would prompt it, how I would work with it. So instead of using traditional search, I've been trying these new ways of aggregating data, like you were doing with Cure.
Yep.
And maybe the point one is we're all learning. We're all experiencing this real time, and I've never seen a technology be adopted so fast.
Yeah.
And so much energy behind it. So there's a lot of promise for what the technology can do in terms of making, pretty much like many activities just easier to do. So it's very promising. At the same side, we have to look at risk, and it could have lack of information or misinformation in the data sets. So there's always benefit and risk to every emerging technology. And I was also reflecting on this a lot. About 10 years ago, when I was in another job, but accountable for technology related to running clinical studies, I was using an AI flavor. It was a neural network for translations, for translating a document from English to Spanish or from English to Portuguese. And so many of you know, like a clinical study would run in more than one country, like mostly, like especially phase 3 studies, right? Anywhere between 5 to 20 countries. So in documents, you would have to translate a set of documents for all those countries. So there's a lot of effort that goes into document translation. And one of the first neural networks that I was starting to use and the teams were starting to use in clinical studies were translation engines to assist the translators. And the first year, that a translation will get maybe 40% accurate. And in the second year, it was 50%. And then it got better and better over time. And I tell that story because I think the use of a generative AI model would follow a similar pattern, especially in the space we operate in, because we have to do everything with care and quality. So when we're all learning, and then when we find that use case that's going to really help accelerate the process, then it'll be deployed, it'll be tested, it'll be proven and validated, and scaled. So start small, scale when ready, and there will be, I think, opportunities to use the technology in the future. So I hope that provides my perspective of kind of where I am in the learning journey, because we're all learning about it.
We're all learning. Yes, we're all still learning. Speaking of which, I mean, there's a tsunami of data, and it's going to take, not just technology, but the best brains. And the next generation of scientists are going to be those who understand both health and data and technology. I mean, it's a new breed, right? How do we create more of those types of scientists? I mean, do we clone you, and how do we clone you? Or how do we create more of, the breed of scientists who are able to look at data, able to, combine different disciplines and move from data to really drug discovery and, vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably don't want to clone me, but uh, so the maybe my journey. So I started in engineering,
Hmm.
and then I went into consulting and healthcare,
Hmm.
and then it was by chance, but somewhat calculated my journey to where I am today.
Yeah.
And each career transition kind of built on the last. And I've been working in R&D in different capacities for over 22 years now.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, that was kind of a calculated journey, but it was I was an engineer working side by side with medical doctors, with scientists, helping to organize information, digitize processes, digitize information, and then picked up enough of the business domains to be a good partner, to be sitting side by side, and now deploying
Hmm.
kind of more technology investment
Hmm.
to move things faster and better. So um, that's my journey. I share that because
Hmm.
maybe it helps others that are kind of thinking about their careers and how they build skill in the technology and the scientific
Yeah.
domain. But I do also believe uh, it's really difficult for an individual to learn every discipline.
Hmm.
So this is where
Collaboration comes in,
collaboration
right?
is so
Yeah.
important.
Hmm.
So um, collaborative mindsets, digital mindsets, people that can work together and solve problems together, uh, that don't fear failure, that learn. That's so important because you need multidisciplinary teams. I think this facility in Cure brings
Hmm.
that to life
Yeah.
very well in order to tackle these very, very difficult problems. So, yeah, I think we'll have teams solving problems, and I do
That's a
this
great,
convergence of skills is important as well.
yeah. But I think that's a great thing to bring up, because it is about teams, right? No individual or no one organization, no one discipline is going to be able to solve some of the toughest healthcare challenges that we face. But, as you scale up, some of your efforts at GSK, I'm sure you're looking for talent, right? What type of people are you looking for? Are you looking for people to contribute? Because, that's a lot of data to be going through and accelerating drug discovery.
Yeah, so I'll have to kind of plug our team a little bit. Yeah, we announced GSK Onyx.tech. So there's a microsite that has the open roles that we're recruiting.
Yeah.
We're hiring over 100 people this year in the domain of definitely focused on data platform, data products, data engineering. But these teams, we operate in what's called like a data mesh, where we have teams that are really close to patient data, or teams that are close to genetics and genomics data, or teams that are close to chemistry, manufacturing, control data. So when I was describing the digital twin for the manufacturing processes, each one of those domains is actually different. So it's difficult to find, of course, a single person that has it all. So we have these data domain teams that we're recruiting in. So yeah, we have the ambition to build a team that can actually uh, bring and scale AI. So that's the journey that we're on. But for those of you that are interested, GSK Onyx.tech is the microsite where you can learn more.
That's great. And so this morning, as I was driving to the train station, I heard an NPR report. It's actually the person who discovered or is the founder of the Chat GPT was talking about being actually a little bit more cautious about AI, number one. And number two, the State of Biotechnology or Biopharmaceuticals Industry report stated that AI is going to be the most disruptive. So, on the one hand, there is so much promise, and yet there is so much sort of cautionary fears or what have you. Uh, but actually, it's not one or the other, right? How do we make sure that we leverage AI and leverage it for good, AI for good, while at the same time, take into consideration the ethical, legal, social concerns of the society?
Yeah, another awesome question. So the companies that are deploying AI need very good governance. that are looking at the use cases from multiple angles, all the angles that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And the way that my team works very closely with the AI team is the focus on data, because we can ensure the data input in the provenance and the lineage of how the data goes from source of generation through to insight is completely tracked. Another engineering problem that needs to be solved. And so when you're managing an AI at scale, you need big investments in data platform and data engineering. So they have to go side by side. But the governance of the platform and the governance of the data and the governance of the use of AI is very important.
Absolutely. And this comes time and time again, each time you introduce new technology, right? These are the things that we need to think about as society. Well, thank you so much, Mike Montello. Really appreciate you being here. And thank you to the GSK team for, enlightening us a little bit about the use of AI, data, and digital to really speed up drug discovery. Thank you for being with us.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that we have a few minutes with the audience here, both in the room and live on LinkedIn, but also on the webinar, to see if you have questions here. So want to make sure we answer your questions. Anybody? Okay, yep. So why don't we start over here, question number 1, and then we'll go to you and then you. If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Charlie Ford. I'm with the Government of Ontario, Canada. I'm thinking about the work that GSK has done in HIV and AIDS, and thinking about how the HIV virus is particularly, difficult for therapeutics in the way that it evolves. And I'm just curious if there are specific diseases or molecules or therapeutics that you find. I'm sure all of these find value in innovative technologies such as AI, but are there specific diseases that you find are the needle is moving faster with the use of AI?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Across infectious disease, vaccines, immunology, oncology, so these diseases that we're focused on, all the uses of technology I explained are applicable. So whether it was the digital twins in the manufacturing processes or the use of human genetics, functional genomics, and AI. So these tools are platform tools. So they're available across modalities. So that's the approach. It's a platform approach to be able to apply them to now each model gets very specific depending on what question you're trying to answer. But these platforms are very applicable to multiple modalities and multiple diseases.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to you next, and then you at the back, and then over here. Oh, sorry.
I'm Steph Davis. I'm with Elke Therapeutics. Thank you for this presentation. In terms of, you mentioned digital twinning can increase the batch of a variety of different compounds, like natural product compounds, where we're focusing on. So is this applicable for multi-step synthesis or parallel synthesis process in a lab setting, as far as calibration and adjustments so that you can decrease risk in the synthesis of various compounds?
Yeah, it's a good question, technical question. So you can, after the session, you're welcome to come up with me, and I can also put you in touch with experts. The use case that I was mentioning was generating a large molecule. So the process involved with making large molecules. So, but if you wanted to follow up with me after, I can put you in touch with some of the experts that are in that area.
Cool. Over there in the back, and then to the front.
Thank you. My name is Wilson. I work on knowledge management. Question is, with the current geopolitical tension between China and the US and talent acquisition, how are you managing that? Because there's a lot of political rhetoric, and a lot of Chinese researchers in the United States are not getting comfortable with what's happening. How are you managing that? How are you evaluating the situation in terms of investment, R&D, and those kind of things? Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think from my standpoint, a lot of the systems that are leveraged in clinical development are global systems. This is common across the industry. And whether you're running a clinical study in China or a clinical study in a country in Europe, the industry operates in a very global manner. So the challenge is you, of course, need to ensure you comply with all local laws, as well as you enable a process that you can aggregate data across different countries. So it's being managed, right? And there's a lot of changes happening with definitely in the area of cybersecurity law. That when those changes happen, then that could cause changes to architecture of the technology. So that's what my team is looking at. So it's being monitored, and depending on what happens within the different countries, like we can respond to the technology to ensure that things are still working.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay. There's a question here in the front, and then we'll go to the question over there.
Hey, my name is Matt Sturgio. I work at Tempest Labs on our data platform, so very relevant conversation. Wanted to follow up with Seema's earlier question on data sharing and all these different partnerships that GSK is leveraging, and there's certainly a lot of opportunity there, but I'm wondering if you could speak to like potential challenges you see with these types of partnerships.
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, the challenge is, technical challenges. So each partnership, the partner could have a different architecture than us. So the interfaces. So how does the data flow from one company to the next? It takes sometimes takes months in order to build those interfaces and bridges across the different companies. And that's our ambition with Onyx, is actually to make that easier. So we could have a more scalable solution across the collaborators. So that's definitely something we're focused on. Some other challenges, the intellectual property is an area that we'll have to always ensure when I speak about data governance, and ensuring that the data platform tracks the provenance of use of the data is also very important when data goes out and data comes in. So it's very complex. That's why there's teams of engineers that are taking a look at these data flows and taking a look at the different data governance principles that need to apply and be kind of coded in. We have an ambition to code policy, because if we can computationally enable the data flows, we can flow data faster, make decisions faster, accelerate R&D. So that's the ambition. But it's ensuring the data governance is set up and running smoothly, and then the technical challenges are two that come to mind. So thanks.
Thank you. Christine?
Hi, I'm Christine Brito. I work here at Deerfield. I do drug discovery, and I spent many decades in big pharma. One of the advantages of being in big pharma back in the day is that we would create our own data. We would have our own proprietary compounds, and we could differentiate ourselves based on the type of science, and we kept all the data close to ourselves. Now with AI, you're leveraging, GSK generates a lot of data, but there's a lot more data out there in the world. And one of the benefits, I think, of AI is that you can actually democratize drug discovery, perhaps, because now you're leveraging more public data. Just curious what GSK thinks about democratizing drug discovery using AI, and how you differentiate yourself as well at the same time.
That's a great question. So we're definitely building our internal AI and data capabilities with GSK Onyx and our AI team, our AI ML team. So we're building internal capability because we can move faster and build the skills and build the career and have the talent. But partnerships are also extremely important. So it's not everything is done in our walls. So I think the example with Tempest is a good one to give access to certain data. We also partner with tech companies. So we partner very closely with Microsoft, with Google, in order to help run some of the technology platform components to make things work, especially as the exponential growth of data also has, we talked a little bit about microchips and the amount of computing required to do the processing is exponential growth as well. So we rely on partners on the tech side and partners on the science side. So not everything's done. It's done through partnerships as well. So I guess you could consider that a level of democratization, but also internal capability build and focus is important too.
All right. Question over there. And there is one question over there and here as well. Okay. So we'll go here and then we'll go there.
Hi, my name's Nicole McKnight. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Energent Pharmaceuticals. We're a drug delivery platform, early stage startup. I was wondering if you could give any advice to the entrepreneurs in the room who are trying to start and build companies around AI and machine learning.
Keep going.
I mean, especially around AI and creating intellectual property around the technology. It's an especially tricky thing to do instead of, your classic small molecule composition of matter drug discovery startups.
Sure. Yeah. We need startups to innovate, and I know it's a lot of work and a lot of energy. And we do work with smaller companies as well that are innovating, that can just move faster, or they're solving a precise problem. So I think we need startups in the ecosystem. The advice is interesting. I think if there's getting access to expertise is probably the one thing that raises to the top. So that can be done through academia collaborations or through pharma and others that can help inform. Because sometimes what problem are you solving is answering that question's hard. So if you have access to expertise that can help the startup kind of navigate through that, would be something to search for. But thanks for asking the question. And yes, I think the ecosystem, of course, needs the startups that are probably moving at a little bit faster pace than some of the larger companies as well.
Thank you. So we'll take that question, and then we'll go to one from the LinkedIn Live, and then we'll go to you. Okay. Question over there?
This is a very intriguing and impactful presentation. Thank you. I'm Susan Krause, President and founder of Green Corsair Labs Global and Green Zodiac Labs Global. So my question is, you mentioned the very interesting and very impactful leadership partnership in terms of UC Berkeley and CRISPR. And GSK is a global company, I believe. I believe you're a British company, am I correct?
Yeah.
So can you speak to your global academic collaborations in terms of neuroscience and oncology? And then in terms of the very interesting tech partnerships, how can you give us an example when you collaborate with Google? Know where Gluber came from. When you collaborate with Google or Microsoft, how do you partition the ownership? Are you partitioning 50-50 ownership? Because AI is so key, and if their tech and GPU and infrastructure is so key in terms of advancing AI, how would you partition ownership to Google or Microsoft in terms of these joint collaborations?
Okay, good questions. So I'll tackle the last one first, if that's okay. So Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Platform, the technologies is leveraged. Okay, so the actual ownership of the data ownership sits with GSK, right? So it's using the technology. It's almost an alternative to kind of running data centers. If you kind of think about the last 20 years, a lot of pharmas, a lot of companies have their own data centers, and then that's migrating to the cloud technologies. So hopefully that answers that question. And then as far as collaborations, there's many collaborations globally. Specifically to neuroscience, there is a relatively newer collaboration at Oxford in the UK. And if you wanted to follow up with me after the session, I'm happy to connect you into others that can be more specific and know more about the academic collaborations. But they're global and they're in many countries. And GSK is a UK-based company as well. But we have large operations here in the U.S. And I'm based in outside of Philadelphia in a town called Collegeville, which is where we have a big R&D center.
So we have a question actually from the virtual audience. So Google recently released their AI tool for drug discovery. Do you think that big tech companies will have an increasingly larger role in drug discovery?
Yeah, well, I mean, Google, that's public, did release. It came out of the DeepMind efforts, for those of you that follow that. That's the one that I know of. So I don't know if others are following suit. But yeah, I think it's interesting that maybe companies that you wouldn't expect are now thinking about drug discovery and how that works, that are looking at it from a tech lens. And I think that is like if there's like kind of one key message for today's talk is technology is that important. Like technology, we need to have technology and science and talent together solving these problems. And I would say, historically, because I've been in R&D for quite some time, science was super important, and then technology was enabler, and now technology and science are working together in ways that are much closer and much aligned to the big problems that we're solving. So yeah, I think what Google's doing is interesting, and there's a lot of the one startup that was mentioned. There's many startups that are looking at the business problem from a technology view, like we discussed today as well.
Thank you. One more question from the virtual, and then I'll come to you. So in drug development, we talk a lot about best in class, right? But with the AI systems now, how can you ensure that you're developing or advancing the best AI discovery processes and systems?
Yeah, so I think it goes to the governance and the quality processes. And sometimes I correlate this back to statistical inference that the industry has been doing for a very long time. Using just descriptive statistics and more predictive statistics, because you can think using a machine learning model or deep learning model is just another tool to predict. But when you develop the code and when you train the model, the data you train the model on, and when you move the model to production, when it is inferring, every step of the process has to be done at the highest quality levels. So that's how you control the system to have the highest quality and observability. So there's a little bit of engineering discipline that goes into a machine learning model, like you would apply to other types of software that was developed before this technology.
Yes, absolutely. Question from you, Miti.
Hi, I'm Miti Kalra, and I'm here from Makovsky PR. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I have a two-part question. So there is a lot of energy behind, all these new tools and AI, and ML, all of that. But with the pharmaceutical industry, there's always a hesitancy to adopt these kinds of technologies and tools, and kind of, are you seeing any pushback internally? And if so, or not even just internally, but like with partners, with regulatory, I know the FDA recently came out with some guidance on that, but what would be your advice be, or how are you moving, helping bring everybody forward with you?
Okay, I love that question, by the way, because there's two parts. You have to engineer and build these new technologies, but at the other end, people are in the loop. Scientists are in the loop. They're using these new tools, and it is probably harder to get people to adopt new ways of working in tools than maybe the AI model and data. So that's where I arrived. Whether it was introducing a translation engine for a document many years ago, to ranking a target and working with our AI teams and the scientific teams on that. So the change management part of this can't be discounted internally and externally. So it's a big shift in ways of working and being kind of inclusive to the multidisciplinary approach of collaboration. So these are big shifts, and something we call Be Digital. It's a way of kind of digitally working in order to use these new tools to work a bit differently. And I think the introduction of ChatGPT and generative AI is a really good example. Like people exploring, how does this tool work? How am I going to use it? What the risks are? So we're all listening to that conversation right now. And but yeah, it's going to take some effort on the adoption change side that has to be equally invested in, as well as the engineering of the actual tech itself.
One more question over there.
Hi, my name is Ada. I'm a scientist with Apertura Gene Therapy. That was a really good segue into a question that I wanted to ask. So I'm a scientist. I work in the lab. And on the side, I'm also a data manager. So what are some pieces of advice you might have for someone who's working in the lab to start thinking about how we should view our data so that it can become useful to us later on? You mentioned earlier about sometimes you approach the data with different models. So when we're doing the science in the lab, we may not necessarily know how to structure our data. What piece of advice do you have for us?
Yeah, so agility is probably the one term that kind of raises to the top, because yeah, I mean, you're running an experiment, you're not quite sure what your next action will be until you get your data and start to understand it. And so being agile in the process and being open to new tools and new ways of kind of visualizing the information, trying to reduce PowerPoint and use more tools that allow scientists to explore the data sets, which is a different way of working than if you kind of outputted the experiment, built a PowerPoint deck, and presented the PowerPoint deck. So versus here's the data, let's explore the data together. So there's just different ways of working, different types of tools, different types of visualizations that I would immerse myself in. But hopefully that's helpful. But it's yeah, there's a initiative to make it easier for lab scientists and as these new tools are introduced, and it's going to take time. It's very related to the adoption question. So it takes a lot of effort and training, right, to train on these new technologies. So.
Right. So one more question
Okay.
from virtual, and then we can wrap it up so there's enough time for people to mingle and ask you follow-up. So, we talked a little bit about, the AI and machine learning is only as good as the data that it can, work with, right? So how do you constantly validate that you have access to the breadth of data that you need and that you have the latest technologies so that you're always looking for better insights and proving that, that you have the additional edge for clarification and identification of novel drugs?
Yeah, so that's that's the quality of the data is what the data engineering groups work on, and maybe that can be the next talk.
Yeah.
But the
next Tuesday talk coming up.
So it's a very disciplined industrial kind of process to engineer data pipelines with quality and to maintain and support data products. So I draw kind of analogy to applications, because I think a lot of people are used to apps, right? They're in the app store and available in the app store. They're maintained. They download. Most of them work well. We have to do the same thing with data, right? Data has to be described with metadata, and data itself needs to have a life cycle at the same level of discipline as apps. So you have applications and you have data, and then that's the investment in GSK Onyx.tech. So it's the data engineering, the discipline, and the platform to make it all available. And if that's done to the highest quality, then the data that's inputted into the algorithms will be the highest quality. So that's the ambition. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, and one final thing, and then we'll end this here. So at the end of the day, right, this was again this morning on NPR, as I was saying, there was this whole conversation about AI and how it's going to disrupt and how do we need to govern and governance models, et cetera. At the end of the day, AI is not, quote unquote, making the final decision. It's a human, and is it or is it not, was the key question. And how do you establish trust that artificial intelligence is actually telling you something that you should trust?
So, do you trust Waze when it gives you the prediction?
Absolutely. Because it's most of the time and always actually, it's right. Plus, I validate it because is the accident still there? And then if it's been cleared, I say, nope, it's cleared. So then it's updating.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it goes with the adoption. It goes with the kind of the new training that everyone needs to have when they're adopting these new tools. So it will take time to build and release the tools, and it will take time to adopt and learn and get used to using the tools. So, over time, and we have experienced this in our consumer lives, beginning to adopt the tools. So the same thing will start to happen within large enterprises as well as they deploy. But yep, I think a little bit of time and training and learning loops because things may not work, so you have to have feedback loops, right, to help continuously improve what you're deploying and make it work for essentially the end user or the customer. Yep.
Great, thank you so much. So from space, the final frontier, to AI, the next frontier, thank you so much for a wonderful talk and for a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks.
Thanks to the audience.